Okay. So as Blake alluded, this is about oaks, and we are going to do a lot of walking today. You're going to get your steps in for sure. And we want to do the official introduction out on the gathering lawn under the shade of some big oaks to kind of talk about the premise of this and what we're going to look at today. Is that good with everybody?
Yes.
All right, follow us. So when we think of oaks in general, we think of, you know, big stately trees. Behind us are two oaks that are probably original residents of the property. They're Quercus fellows, willow oak. And contrary to popular belief, these are not hundreds of years old. These are probably 80 years old at max. We have a much faster growing season here than most parts of the country. So they grow pretty quickly, not all oaks, but these in particular. But I wanted to start here because we're going to look at oaks that are more uncommon, that fit in better with landscapes, hence the name Quirky, and oaks that may not be the easiest to find from a nursery perspective, but also in kind of the true tradition of being an arboretum where we have collections of plants. We are small but mighty. We have a really good collection of oaks here at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. You wouldn't think so being a garden that's, you know, barely 11 acres, but we have kind of shoehorned them in all over the Arboretum. Different sizes, different types. We've pushed the boundaries on hardiness and those sorts of things here too. So we're going to look at a lot of those things today, and things that are our favorites of Evan and I, things that caught our eye doing this. I will give a caveat here. We did this tour last week when I had a really good summer head cold, so I'm relying on Evan's sense of direction to guide us where we need to be. So don't follow me, follow him as we walk around, because I might lead you astray after a nice long weekend. Any questions before we get started? All right, we're going to go to our first tree.
Okay, so behind us here is Lithocarpus henryi. And I did just say Lithocarpus and not Quercus. You might be asking, well, why would you lie to us, Evan? This is a tour about oaks. Well, this is an oak relative, and actually they used to be lumped into oaks together. This is a stone oak or a tan bark oak, specifically Henry's tan bark oak. It used to be lumped in with Quercus until it got split out to about 100 members of Lithocarpus. So this was planted in the 80s from Woodlander's Nursery. It is a nice, neat, evergreen oak relative. And one really cool feature that it has that you might be seeing is it has flowers on spikes, so you'll get a spike of acorns, and you just that's not something you see, and it's got a really nice effect right now. All the flowers are too small to see, but it has a really nice ivory look to the flower, and it does this in June and again in September. It used to be October when it would flower again, but now it's September when it flowers, at least for this year, so we'll see about that. I believe this is from 6,000 feet elevation in south central China. This is the max size, just about. It gets about 30 feet tall here and 20 feet wide. Here you can see it's being eaten by a couple other things, so it's not quite in its full glory, but you can get the idea of what it would be. Noah Weston, the late city horticulturist for the city of Raleigh, planted a couple of these throughout Raleigh, so if you ever spot one, now you know what it is. It likes mild winters, hot summers, and a fair bit of shade, so it can take the part shade. And then to speak of its cold hardiness, the Arnold Arboretum had one, and they're zone 6B, and only once has it died back to the ground, and even when it died back to the ground, it came up perfectly healthy. So there it is, a nice, neat, evergreen oak relative to start the tour. It's quite the oak. Any questions? Carrie? Does it have two crops of acorns? Yes, it does.
You can see some of them on there. Some of the old ones are a little bit kind of a gray color, and they're very, very small, kind of mixed in with the flowers.
Yeah, I wanted to get one, but I forgot my pruners as always. All right.
Let's go to the next one.
We're gonna move this way.
Our next one, right close to our lath house, is Quercus hypoleucoides. I'm one of those people that is terrible at remembering people's names, but I remember plants and plant names. And this is a tree that I've been coming to look at since I've been coming to this garden for the last 20 years or so. I have favorite plants at gardens. This has always been one of my favorites prior to coming here. It is tardily deciduous, kind of sort of evergreen, native to the mountains of northern Arizona and into New Mexico. It's also found in Mexico, and it's one of those oaks that kind of touches on Mexican oaks, and I'll talk about those a little bit later in the tour. But I love the color of this. I love the texture of it. It's got a really coarse leaf, and part of the Latin in its name refers to that white light underside, which I think is really, really pretty. Usually it's kind of a shrubby oak in its native range. Here, where it gets kind of the best of all worlds, it gets a little bit of, it has better soil than it traditionally gets, so it's a little bit bigger than you would kind of see in its native range. Typically shrubby. I love the bark. We've limbed it up for that effect, and also from a space perspective. But I love the color and texture of this oak. It's one of my favorite oaks. I have killed this in other gardens. It's a strong zone 7 tree. It's very adaptable to different types of soil, which is one of the benefits of some of the Mexican or the southwestern United States oaks. They can take a little bit of tough love. They can take the heat. They can take drought situations. They don't need a lot of care. This is in a group of oaks that are being looked at as more of an urban street tree, kind of in the Pacific Northwest. Our good friend Sean Hogan does a lot of that work. He's from Sistis Nursery in Portland, Oregon, and they played around with this tree and some of the other ones to see how well they can adapt in an urban situation. You're not going to find it in most nurseries, garden centers. It's kind of gaining popularity as our climates kind of change, but one of my favorite oaks because of that color and texture. Any questions? Yes. The question was, does it drop its leaves all the time? It's tardily deciduous. In a cold winter, it's going to drop more. I don't think it dropped its leaves this year. You can see on the ground, because it's been dry, because we're kind of in that time of the year when the temperature is kind of dropping a little bit at night, it's starting to drop some leaves. We blow them off in the morning. This is not a tree that's going to drop all of its leaves in the fall. This is going to bother you and make you get out your rake or your leaf blower all year long. It's going to drop a couple here and a couple there. It's not one of those nice ones that drops it all at the same time. Those kind of plants keep us honest horticulturally. Anybody else? All right, we'll go to the next one.
So this is Quirkiest dentata pinnatophyta. Pinnatophyta meaning pinnate leaf, as I've just passed around. It is very deeply lobed. So the species of this, normally dentata has a slightly lobed but pretty entire leaf. And it's also like a 60-foot tall by 60-foot wide, unruly, gangly beast. And this is just the opposite. This is gonna cap out at about 25 feet. This was planted in 1995, so this is about as tall as it's gonna get. Brian Upchurch has described this as a rare beast. I first noticed this plant at our 2025 bloom sale. It looked so good in a gallon. We only had 4, we only sold 2. I was like, this is crazy. What a weird plant. And Sophia was like, you know, we have that in the garden. I was like, no way. And we were like right there. And she was like, yeah, it's right there. And there it is. A little more about this plant. It is hardy to zone 5. It was first described in 1879 from a Japanese garden. It has large gray-green leaves, and it is pretty slow growing, but I think it's worth the wait. So, because no other oak has such like a quirky leaf and lacy texture. So, yeah, a good gift to give to your friends if they're garden lovers. Its origin is China, Japan, and Korea. Dentata is all throughout there, and nobody knows exactly who found or bred this one. It was just first described in 1879. Any questions about Quirkiest dentata pinnatophyta? So the question is, it seems very narrow. Is that typical, or because things have been planted around it? And it is typically narrow, but this is more narrow because things have been grown around it. It normally would be about 15 to 20 feet wide, and that's like 8.
It's growing that way. If you stand
you got
here,
one.
If you stand here, it looks wider.
Yeah, it's growing this way instead of this way. Again.
Deciduous?
Deciduous.
Color? Fall color?
Pretty nondescript.
Yellow, orange,
The straight species will hold on to its leaves a little bit longer, and they're kind of a nice tan color. but that's still a color, I think. And the leaves make a lot of noise when the wind blows them around. This will hold on not quite as long because it's just a different leaf structure, but very, very coarse nonetheless. Every once in a while it'll have red to yellow, but usually it's just a kind of a dusty brown.
All right, so we'll move on to the next plant.
So this next one is Quercus satori, the Sator's oak. This is a oak from northern Mexico. Usually grows in the mountains there, a nice zone 7 tree, 30 by 30 feet tall. This one is tardily deciduous also to hold on to its leaves in cooler winters, but then it'll drop them. I like the texture and the veination of the leaf. It reminds me of our sawtooth oak a little bit, but another one of these Mexican oaks that's being played around with in the nursery industry. They're very soil adaptable, usually grow in full sun. Because this one's from the mountains, it can take a little bit of shade, but does better in full sun. A nice kind of round oval texture to it. I like the smooth bark that has some red ridges in it, but a really good urban adaptable oak. A lot of collection work and conservation work is being done with oaks in Mexico to help preserve them and also look at them as a source for good urban trees for areas where our climate is kind of constantly changing. As I mentioned, very soil adaptable, but also very, very heat tolerant as well. This particular one just speaks to the diversity that our collection has, with lots of oaks from different parts of the world. And in the true meaning of what JC was doing was like evaluating things to see what's going to do well for our neck of the woods. And he was very forward thinking with that sort of thing. We do a lot of work with other botanical gardens, with oak conservation, and helping protect germplasm and collecting seed. And this is a group of oaks that we've had our eyes on for a really long time. Any questions? Deciduous, mostly when it's really mild. Last winter it held on to its leaves for a really long time. This one actually has nice reddish fall color. Very, very shiny leaf. It reminds me a little bit of scarlet oak, that nice kind of bright color with a shiny leaf surface. That's most seasons. When there's a drought or stress, you're not going to have as much of those colors. It'll be more kind of muted. But this one is known for that brighter red fall color. I forgot to mention that. The question was, why is there brown on some of the tips of branches? Sometimes that's cicada damage. Cicada that we all hear at night, they have an ovipositor that is very saw-like, and they'll cut on the edge of a branch, lay eggs, and the theory, part of the reason they do that is that those branches will weaken and drop, those eggs will hatch, and then the cicada go into the ground. So that's some of that. Other might just be wind damage where the tips break when they're young, but I think that's mostly from cicadas.
Just curious, why would a cicada do that? If it wants the eggs in the ground, why wouldn't it just lay them?
It's more vulnerable on the ground. If you think about how clumsy and terrible flyers they are, and they spend most of their life aloft, they spend, most of their life they're in the ground. They climb, hatch out, and fly into the trees, mate, lay eggs, and die relatively quickly. They don't feed during that time frame. So that's where they're safe. They've just evolved over that time frame. And it's kind of a neat mechanism. If you think about it, it's pruning the tree, but it's damaging in a way that the branches will fall off and they'll drop on the ground. It's a horrible thing if you own a nursery and that happens. Sometimes they'll damage Christmas trees. I've heard of that happening where there's a very large brood that hatches out, but they've just evolved over time to develop that mechanism. Mother Nature. Anybody else?
All right, tag me in. This is our next plant. So actually, we're in Oak Grove right now.
Yes.
And this is also a good segue, talking about cicadas, is to talk about how a lot of oaks do a lot of really good ecological things for us.
Yes.
So not only on this tour do we have cool things, but we have things that are functional in the landscape for the things we also treasure, which are our little critters and whole ecological web. So yeah, we're in Oak Grove, which I did not know until I started researching for this tour. I said, what are the OG beds? And I didn't until When did I find, like,
Old Greg.
Old Greg, yeah, Oak Grove. This is Quercus sessilifolia, and it is another evergreen oak. So we are actually one of the first people to formally receive this. This is from the Taiwan Forestry Institute. They gave this to us in 1990. There was a seed distribution of Quercus sessilifolia in 1955, kind of unofficially. And so this is 30 years old, 35 years old. It's supposed to get 20, 25 feet tall. It's super, super tolerant. It's a zone 7 or 8 tree, so I don't know. It's not on our records if it's ever died back to the ground, but that could explain its small stature. Other than that, we could just assume that here this is as big as it gets, but it has been recommended as a small street tree because it's heat tolerant, it's drought tolerant. The new leaves come out as tomentose, so they have little hairs, and so that prevents water loss. It also prevents herbivory. It has a pretty nice bark. I'm a pretty big fan of it. If the tree was bigger, I think it would show better. The Sir Harold Hillier Gardens 30-year-old tree is 25 feet tall, so I don't know why this one's so small, but that's it. That's the Taiwanese evergreen oak, otherwise known as Cloud Mountain oak. Any questions? Is it supposed to be multi-stemmed? Also, I don't know. It would make sense if it died back one time for it to come back with multiple stems. We're gonna see that on one of our oaks later. I really can't tell.
I've seen these in Taiwan, and they tend to be multi-stemmed. They're not a single-stemmed oak. I don't know if that's because of like growing in the mountains and elevation, but they do. I think this one has died back before. That's why it's got three stems.
Yeah.
It's also in a lot of competition, so it's trying to support itself as best it can, which I think is part of the reason it's kind of small. It's competing for resources for all these big trees around it.
All right, let's get out of here. There's too many oaks here.
Too many oaks.
There's an oak. There's an oak right behind you. Bet you didn't even notice.
The next one I want to talk about fits a niche that I really like in trees. I'm a sucker for anything that grows upright. It lends itself to being a good urban tree, doesn't take up a lot of space. Our next oak is that tall, lean fellow back in the back along the fence line. It is Quirkus skinny jeans. From our friends at J. Frank Schmidt and Sons. The marketing for this, you couldn't have picked a better name. The genes is Genes, so the genetics. This is a cross between Quercus robur and Quercus bicolor. Quercus robur is English oak, Quercus bicolor is swamp white. So you get the best of both worlds out of those trees. Quercus robur doesn't do very well for us here. It doesn't like our heat, it doesn't like our humidity, it doesn't like our clay soils. They tend to suffer miserably through our climates, but there are a lot of fastigiate English oaks. Quercus bicolor is a really good urban oak. You can take wet, you can take dry. They've got nice fall color, nice leaf form. So there's been a lot of work breeding those two and coming up with lots of cultivars. And this is one of several. There's another one called Kindred Spirit that I like a lot, and one called Regal Prince, which is also a really good one. This one is probably the most tight, the most upright, 30 to 40 feet tall, usually not more than 15 feet wide, so a really good urban tree. Nice texture throughout the growing season, nice winter interest with that upright growth. Quercus bicolor has nice flaky bark, so those genetics are expressed in this tree. The leaf has a nice white underside to it, so when it moves in the wind, it gives you that dynamic. And the fall color is kind of a nice burgundy red through most seasons. So a really, really good urban tree. Somebody planted a bunch of these at a new coffee shop in Charlotte, which I thought was very appropriate because most of the people that worked there wore skinny jeans. So somebody was using that tree and saw that and bought it because of that reason. But a really good tree for tight situations. Doesn't take up a lot of space from an urban environment. And we've got several of those fastigiate relatives planted along this corridor. If you reference back to our fastigiate tree tour, I think we talked about most of those back then. Any questions?
You can't see the bottom of it from where we are, but it's all bushy at the bottom. Would you ever limit up to be not like that?
You're looking at the big one back there?
Yes.
I would not prune that.
Okay.
Considering that a straight Quercus bicolor can be 30 feet wide at maturity, more round, that's pretty tight. That's pretty small. That's not taking up a lot of space. Of all the cultivars that have been developed, this is the tightest one, I think. Kindred Spirit is also very, very nice. I think we've got one of those further up. But that's kind of meant to be a plant it and forget about it kind of an urban tree. It doesn't need a lot of aftercare. That was a good question. Anybody else? All right, let's keep on trucking.
All right, so I just passed around a leaf. This is Quirkiest insignis, otherwise known as Encino chicalba, which means insignis oak. It's not very exciting, but this is a Central American oak. And so we've been talking about zones. You've heard us talking about hardiness zones. This guy here is a zone 10. So we're a zone 8, so this guy dies back in winter. I don't know if you could really fully consider it a tree. It's more like a perennial at this point, but I thought this guy was important to talk about. One, because it's quirky. It's got cool, big, fuzzy leaves with kind of a serrated margin, a little big for serrations. And also what this guy has is once a decade, it'll flower and produce acorns, and the acorns are the size of a child's fist. So I think that would look really funny on this. I think it would tip it right over, but this won't ever cross with anything, so we don't have to worry about that. Normally it would get 80 feet tall, and the other reason I wanted to talk about this is because he's facing extirpation, which means extinction in its natural habitat. So originally from the mountains of Central America, it's losing habitat to coffee plantations, and in the face of climate change, it's also dying out in some of its native range. And so the populations are becoming more and more spread apart. And when you only flower once every 10 years, it's a little hard to find a mate if the nearest one is, 100 miles south. So that's why this is on Morton Arboretum's endangered list and conservation list. So they're doing some projects on trying to keep the genetics of this guy around. And I would plant this. It's low maintenance. It does this every year, and then it dies back to the ground, and it does this again. It's pretty cute, and it's nice to touch. So that's why I like Quirkiest insignis. To get fall color before it dies back to the ground, from the pictures, it was nothing special. It gets orange, brown. You
can see the new growth is kind of red, coppery colored as it emerges, and very tomentose, very, very hairy.
Yeah, I hope you all touch the leaf. Yes.
So does it support the same sorts of things that a not dying back oak would support?
Does it support things ecologically? Not nearly as much as some of our other oaks. Number one, because this isn't as close to our native range. And number two, to your point, since it's dying back in the winter, a lot of cycles that insects would use are disrupted. So it's not as ecologically useful as some of the other oaks on this tour. All right, let's keep chugging. Okay, so this is Quercus mercenifolia, the bamboo leafed oak. This is another one of our evergreen oaks, and it is called the bamboo leaf oak because its new shoots are these really thin leafed things that are also crimson and purple. So you get some of that spring interest when it first flushes out. It has the leaves kind of have a blue tint, and then against the crimson of the new growth, it almost looks like it's flowering. It's very pretty. So this is kind of the opposite of Greg's fastigiate plant. This is one that's going everywhere, but I think it's spectacular enough to still talk about. This we got in 1989. I almost said 1889, but that would be wrong. 1989, and it has done all this, and it's beautiful. It's also very heat and drought tolerant. It has also been talked about being used as a street tree because it's just that tolerant of stresses. This in the Seattle garden, the Seattle Botanical Garden, is approaching 50 feet tall, and the trunk looks like an elephant's foot. It's a wild plant, and it benefits from hot summers. So what's interesting here is that the hotter it gets, the more drought tolerant this tree becomes. And they're not exactly sure why, but something is triggering genetically. So when it gets hotter, it's able to retain more water. So it does really well for us here, and it looks good all throughout the summers. This is a very dry season. I mean, I see a little bit of dead, but all in all, it looks just as perfect as it would all year round. So a very handsome plant throughout the whole year. That's Quercus mercenifolia. It's a popular wood for cabinet making, drumsticks, and growing mushrooms. Yes.
Are you turning up?
This is the big,
Okay, the big one.
yeah, that's the bamboo leafed oak.
Did you say if it was evergreen or deciduous?
It's evergreen.
They use this a lot. I've seen this in Atlanta as a street tree quite a bit. Really, it's a good, provides a good screen as well because they're very, very dense.
All right, into the winter garden we go.
All right, this is also one of those kind of favorite trees of mine. And this has always been a favorite spot of mine, probably the most underappreciated part of the Arboretum. And Evan has been doing a lot of work to try to right the ship and get things cleaned up. We're also going to do some stuff with moonlight back here, which has made us do some cleaning up and editing. But I love this part of the Arboretum. The whole, all the green just kind of surrounds you. And this oak is a very important part of that. This is Quercus glauca, the evergreen Japanese blue oak, and also sometimes called the ring cup oak. The acorns have a nice ring around them. It is evergreen. Nice rounded forms this really big oval, 40 by 40 feet. And you're not seeing much of the canopy. You're seeing all these multiple trunks that come up. And it really gives you a sense of kind of a sentient being. You know, it is a living thing, but I love how much space it takes up in the garden and provides all this shade and kind of surrounds you in its green shroud. The new growth takes kind of a bronzy color, which is kind of nice. It's evergreen, it won't drop its leaves. It is a little bit more cold adaptable than the oak that we just saw with Evan. A little bit more urban soil tolerant, but definitely on the unusual side, not something that you're gonna see in most places. It needs room to kind of do this and expand, but it's really kind of anchors this garden, and it's one of my favorite plants back here. Any questions about this guy? Yes. Yeah, the comment was the bark does not look very oak-esque. It is very, very smooth. The family that this plant is in, Fagaceae, beeches are in that family, so it's more representative of beeches. The lithocarpus that Evan talked about earlier, they tend to have smoother bark, more like beech trees. So it definitely kind of runs in that family dynamic of having that smoother bark. But it just speaks to the diversity of oaks, that all the different types of characteristics that they have. They're very hard to pigeonhole. And the evergreen nature of them too. That's kind of unique in a species to have deciduous and evergreens as well. Anybody else? What is the definition of an oak? I don't know how to answer that. Yeah, they produce acorns as part of their morphology. They have distinct characteristics. A lot of the times the buds are clustered at the end of a branch. They reproduce through acorns. Their flowering parts are very similar. You saw the lithocarpus with those long spikes. Oak flowers kind of look like that, but they hang down. So those are very similar characteristics. Kind of the band of where they grow around the world tends to be kind of similar. All right, let's go to the next one. Evan was very nice to point out this is our most dangerous garden. So I'm taking lots of liberties here that I don't encourage any of you here or viewing to do. This is Quercus turbinella, the Sonoran scrub oak. And this is one of those types of oaks that only a mother of it could love. They always look kind of scrubby, hence where they're from, northern Mexico into Arizona and New Mexico. This is a tree that is really, really drought tolerant. I don't know if this would make a good urban oak, but from an oak collection arboretum standpoint, it's one that we wanted to exhibit and show so that we could use it and talk about it. This tree is a very important part of ecosystems in that part of the world. It produces a lot of acorns that a lot of different animals will feed on. That's also how it reproduces itself, but more wide than tall generally. I like this kind of nice turquoisey, bluish, glaucous look to it, which gives it kind of a nice kind of a glow at certain times of the day. But a tree only a plant geek could love just a really kind of unique individual. I like the scrub oaks. Anytime I've traveled to that part of the world, they always really stand out to me, but a really important part of that ecosystem. And we would be remiss if we didn't talk about it on this tour because of that unique nature of it. And again, speaking to the diversity of our oak collection, growing things from Asia to Mexico and kind of all points in between. Any questions before we move on? The question was, what kind of acorns does it have? They're very long and small. The cap is much smaller than the actual acorn itself. They're very narrow looking, kind of a glossy chestnut brown color when they mature, but usually lots of them on the trees. Every other year, every 3 years, something like that. They don't produce a lot of acorns for us here. I had a couple of these in my last garden, and I never saw it produce acorns. This is a really good built environment here with manufactured soil. So this looks much better than the ones that I've grown in the past because of that more natural soil that it's used to. Not a moist, well-drained soil kind of an oak, which again speaks to the diversity of the oaks. Anybody else?
What made you plant that oak right there?
I'm not going to take credit for it, but I think the main reason was this is kind of the plant palette that this oak naturally grows in. It likes these kind of sparse, well-drained soils. So this garden is kind of the perfect spot for this type of oak. This is kind of what its habitat is in the wild, as close as we can get. All right, let's keep on moving. 2 more left.
So this is Quercus palustis green pillar. This is a form of the pin oak, which we all know, but a much tidier version of it. Again, we're suckers for a fastigiate oak, especially as yards get smaller and people want neater looking plants. Ultimately, this guy could reach 40 feet tall and 12 feet wide, but it's gonna take a long time for it to get there, so it's worth planting in the meantime, even if that space is ultimately too large. This guy likes the full sun. You could tell if you were to come around the back here, you'd see the backside is a little naked, so don't look back there, that's impolite. And if you might also notice here, these are just root suckers, and if I was a better man, I would have pruned these before the tour. But overall, it's a really nice plant, and one of its best features is that in the fall, it gets a maroon, uniform maroon fall color. I've seen someone do a hedge of these, and it's just a block of maroon. It can also take shade too. And like the pin oak, it does prefer organic, rich, moist, acidic soils, but it's a tolerant plant. So even if you plant it somewhere else, it will look fine. It's just gonna grow slower. Any questions about Quercus palustis green pillar?
How old is that one?
I think this one is 9 years old. Yeah.
And so how tall would you say that is now?
20 feet?
At least 2 of me.
3 of you almost.
Maybe 3. So 15 feet?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the root suckers, Elizabeth pointed out that the root sucker leaves look different from the plant itself, which means yes, it's grafted. If you were to come up right here, you'd see a big callus formation, and oftentimes at a graft union, you can see that the trunk bark looks different or it's a different thickness. That's because the root stock has a different growth rate than the rest of the tree, which is often a little slower growing. So that's how you can tell if a tree has been grafted oftentimes.
And I can't tell if it's grafted on scarlet oak or this looks a little red oakish to me.
Cool, Greg.
All right, our last one is this big guy up here. So our last one is Quercus oglethorpensis. It's a native to the southeast oak. It's this great big guy here. This is one of the biggest that I've ever seen. And I think it's the biggest one in Raleigh. It's got a sign on it that says so. So if it has a sign, that has to be the case. This is a tree that I like because I've done some conservation work on this, collecting it in the wild. It is endangered species, mostly habitat destruction, all kind of through the southeast. It used to go all the way up into South Carolina. And into like the Piedmont of North Carolina, but it's harder and harder to find. So a lot of work has been done collecting this in different parts of its range to preserve the germplasm. It's actually kind of a nice kind of stately oak and fits that moniker that we think of when we think about oak trees being big and stately. It has yellowish fall color in the best of seasons. It's deciduous. It'll drop all of its leaves in the fall. I like the bark that it has on it as it gets older, kind of that classic nice ridged bark that you think about with oaks. But it's a special tree because of that history, and it's the conservation work that's being done on it. This is a garden that we've been doing a lot of work on, our contemplation garden. We've added a lot of new things, which I think only highlights these specimens as well as we're kind of cleaning them up. Anybody have any questions? Evan mentioned Woodlander's Nursery down in Aiken, South Carolina. Bob McCartney, the former owner, did a lot of oak conservation work, and he is a source of oaks. If you're looking for some of these unusual ones that we had, chances are he might have them. He introduced this one to me many years ago, and they have some planted down in Aiken where his nursery is, but well worth looking. All right, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you all. Hopefully we opened your mind to some new forms and functions, some new ways you can play with your landscape, and oaks are cool. So thanks for joining us, and we get to talk about what we love. So
Thank you guys. Thanks.